Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. With Poland's presidential election on the horizon, candidates are shaping their narratives on key international issues, particularly the country's relationship with the United States and the war in Ukraine. The shifting dynamics between Washington, Kyiv, and Warsaw have sparked debate among Polish politicians, with differing views on Donald Trump's approach to Ukraine and its impact on Poland's security. How are these narratives influencing the election? Well, joining us today on TVP World to discuss this is Jakub Jaraczewski, research coordinator at Democracy Reporting International. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you very much for having me. Welcome.
So before we dive into the stances of various parties within Poland, can you help us understand how central is foreign policy, especially relationship with the United States and Ukraine, is to the Polish presidential race?
Since the president of Poland is involved in carrying out the foreign policy and shares this role with the prime minister and the government, it plays traditionally a strong role in shaping the Poland's international presence. Furthermore, the topics of security in particular are strongly an area of interest of the president because, among others, the president is formally the head of the military and also has an extensive apparatus, including a National Security Bureau that deals directly with security issues. Under the presidency of Andrzej Duda, the division of roles between the governments, previous governments of the party PiS and the president has been that the president has been mostly involved in relationships with the United States and on defense. And thus, there is expectation that the security angle, and particularly the relationship with the military partners of Poland and ensuring security of the country, will also play a very important role in the president's role going forward after the upcoming presidential election.
Right, and while the current ruling coalition stands on the Ukraine issue and Zelensky stays relatively consistent, the same can't really be said about the right-wing law and justice presidential candidates. What's their stance on the matter? We've seen them actually coming out and criticizing Zelensky's handling of Donald Trump. How is that going to shape? How's that going to shape the broader election narrative?
Well, definitely what we can see is that the polarization of the Polish political scene means that the primary opposition party, PiS, and the candidate they support will align themselves directly against what is the position of Prime Minister Donald Tusk and government. So when Donald Tusk highlights the need for European unity and collaboration within the framework of the European Union and its partners, PiS will shape its narrative around supporting the United States and working with President Trump. But as we have seen over the last couple of days, this position becomes increasingly challenging to elaborate because the American administration of President Trump is clearly moving to undermine the position of Ukraine in the current conflict, thus making it more difficult to claim that working closely with President Trump and working with his vision for security in Europe would be supportive for Poland. Then again, on the other hand, even if the European Union was to step out defense spending and become a much stronger security actor, Poland is still heavily dependent on supplies of weapons and presence of American troops. So it places all the candidates in a rather difficult situation, having to navigate those issues. However, we clearly see that for now the opposition candidates, Mr. Nawrocki is primarily looking into a stronger bond between Poland and Trump's administration.
All right. Do you see any consensus among Polish candidates from different parties when it comes to maintaining a strong tie with the United States, or do you see that this might actually become a dividing issue?
I think it will become a dividing issue, but likely not to the point of open calling for complete divestment of relationship with the United States. Poland is heavily reliant on the United States as an actor providing security. Poland is heavily invested in purchasing American weaponry, including tanks and fighter planes. There is a growing American military presence in Poland, which has been increasing over the last few years. So It is difficult in this situation to fully claim that Poland should just diverge entirely and ditch American support in favor of working with European partners. So I don't think that we will see a consensus in the way of full collaboration with Trump administration. I think that the position of Prime Minister Tusk's party Civic Coalition and his candidate Rafał Trzaskowski will be to try to balance things and to increase working with European partners while maintaining the link to the United States. This is very difficult in the Polish, let's say, geopolitical position to try to claim that Poland needs to quickly and completely break up the link with the United States. Such position would be simply not feasible, and I doubt it will resonate with many voters.
All right, and hypothetically, we saw Mr. Karol Nawrocki, the law and justice-backed candidate, being quite strong rhetorically, at least, against Ukrainian president when it comes to his dealing with President Donald Trump. Do you think that if we see a different party come into power, or if he indeed takes the presidency in this election cycle, is there a risk that Poland's strong Ukrainian position will actually shift in any way?
So even if the new president of Poland would be critical of Ukraine increasingly, and we see it not only from the candidate supported by PiS, Mr. Nawrocki, but also the far-right candidate Sławomir Mencen from the party Konfederacja has been also highly critical of Ukrainian government in the recent times. I don't think that a full shift of Polish policy would happen, because ultimately the foreign policy in Poland is carried out primarily by the government and the prime minister. Ultimately, this is they who have all the practical tools for implementing foreign policy. However, we could potentially see a situation where Poland would see a divergence between the two primary actors of the foreign policy, the government and the president, with them breaking the tradition of a cohabitation and collaboration between those two offices and sending different messages. That would certainly make carrying out a coherent foreign policy difficult, as some sort of collaboration between the prime minister and the president is expected in order to be able to carry out a strong international message.
All right, like I mentioned, if the message isn't coherent, that might pose as an issue. As we traditionally see, even if the prime minister and the president don't see eye to eye when they go to the United States and engage with the U.S., their message seems to be relatively unified. But do you think that this Poland's internal political division and polarization might actually weaken its ability to navigate this relationship, be it with the United States or even on the Ukrainian front?
I think, yes, the increasing polarization and the fact that people in Poland start to increasingly strongly gravitate towards two opposing camps might make it more difficult, and finding a common ground challenging. And so far, the Prime Minister Tusk and President Duda, despite their differences and despite divergences in several key areas, such as the rule of law, have been able to work together in most of the foreign policy and most of the defense and security policy together, although not without certain tensions, such as, for example, the issue of President Duda refusing to appoint new ambassadors proposed by the Tusk government. However, the more Poland becomes polarized, the bigger is the danger that in the future the government and the president would diverge to the point that making a coherent foreign policy would be difficult. Ultimately, the president in Poland is elected by a direct vote and has a very strong mandate. And even though this mandate is not reflected in having the president as the primary part of the executive power, like it is in France, for example, or the United States, still, yet there is an expectation that this will of the voters will be reflected in the president's policy and the collaboration with the government. So, yes, I think that there is a dangerous potential that in the next, after the presidential elections, where we will have a new president, we might end up with a situation where the government and the president will diverge to the detriment of the Polish foreign policy.
Right now, traditionally, we do know that President Trump and Polish President Andrzej Duda have a decent personal relationship, and Vice President J.D. Vance has also been quite supportive of the previous Law and Justice government. So do you think that the Americans would have a certain level of influence when it comes to the upcoming Polish presidential election, or do the fact that they align closely with the Republican Party would actually be detrimental for their electoral prospects?
It's hard to say. Insofar when it comes to Poland specifically, the Trump administration has been generally positive, praising the Poland's high level of defense spending, contrasting it with issues with low defense spending by other EU member states. And it seems like during the brief visit to Washington, President Duda has been assured that the United States will not reduce their presence in Poland and will not put Poland's security at risk. But unfortunately, we also know that President Trump is a person who is quick to change his policy and reverse it. And if that would happen, that the American retreat from Europe would start to include Poland, and those in Polish politics who have been supporting and advocating for stronger links with the United States might find themselves in a difficult situation, having to try to explain to the voters how it is possible that the Americans, who are supposed to be our best friends, are suddenly retreating from the region entirely and are abandoning their commitment to protect Polish defense. This unpredictability of the Trump administration is a big issue because it is very difficult, not just for Polish government, but also for other partners of the United States to form some concrete expectations of how the American government will behave coming down the line in a couple of weeks, months even, or days, as in some case, making it very difficult to sell the idea of treating the United States as a reliable partner.
Right, definitely. It's making things very hard to navigate. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.